So at first, when the Rebbe agreed to have the cameras come in, it was cutting-edge technology. No one had ever done this. But people have to understand. So the first Farbrengen, there were maybe 4 people, and we were going to each do a sicha. Long story short, by the next Farbrengen, nobody showed up. Everybody's afraid, everybody's frightened, Jews are frightened, and Hashem says to the Jewish people, don't be afraid, I did it all for you. Moshiach will stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash and say, the time of your redemption has arrived. So there's no miracle involved.
And Purim Tavshin Aleph, when the missiles came and they didn't hit anybody?
So what was the miracle?
39 Scud missiles, they fell and no one got hurt.
That's not what the Rebbe was excited about.
Good afternoon, Rabbi Friedman. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for joining us here today for one of the Aleph conversations. Rich Hashem, later in the conversation, we're going to speak about the Aleph that's coming out next week, which is about Mashiach during Zman HaGolus, but we're going to begin. We're living in a crazy time. They're calling now an unprecedented time. So I'm going to start with asking you about Summer Tavshin Nun. If you could take us back, Saddam Hussein, there was threats, Israel, bombs, and the Rebbe Sichos that the Rebbe spoke about in Tavshin Nun Aleph that were connected to such a thing as well.
So, of course, generally, when people start panicking and saying things are terrible, the Rebbe corrects us. He says, no, look at the positive. So instead of complaining that the Melech Paras is going to destroy the world, quote the end of the Medrash, that Mashiach says, Igi Azman Geulaschem. But that itself is a very interesting, I'll give you the whole quote. The year that Mashiach comes, Moshiach will stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, and he will say to the Yidden, humble ones, Higi Azman Geulaschem, the time of your redemption has come. And if you don't believe me, look at my light that is shining on you. So the most obvious question is, Moshiach is going to come, and we're not going to believe him? We are so bad. We're stiff-necked people, but there's a limit to that too. What do you mean we're not going to believe him? How is that even possible? So I think the idea is, Higi Azman Geulaschem, your time of redemption has come because look at the miracles. Years of miracles. Scuds falling, no damage, no injuries reported, like as if that's normal. And even when there are, God forbid, some damages or it's a fraction of what people expected. And the success of every Israeli rocket and every Israeli missile. Okay, so you would think, doesn't that show that Mashiach is coming? That Mashiach has come? That Mashiach is... And the answer is no. We're used to miracles. How did we survive 2,000 years of Golus? Miracles. Okay, so another miracle. Why does that prove that it's Mashiach?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things the Rebbe said when communism collapsed, the Rebbe said, Adosim Mashiach. Why? The 6-Day War, which the Rebbe was so excited about and spoke about it so many times, he never said it was Mashiach. It's Nissim. Didn't say Mashiach. But the collapse of communism, the Rebbe said clearly, this is Mashiach. The difference is this. If there's a war and the good guys beat up the bad guys, that's not Mashiach. There's no choice. The good guys have to beat up the bad guy otherwise. And we have Purim, we have Chanukah. That's not Mashiach. That's how we survive Golus. But when communism collapsed on its own, nobody killed him, nobody shot him, nobody bombed him. It just disintegrated from within. In other words, the Klippa itself admitted that it can't go on. Okay, that's Mashiach. So now we're seeing miracles, and it's very exciting, but the fact that we need a miracle is not good news. Rambam says, very strange, uncharacteristic expression. It shouldn't enter your mind that Mashiach does miracles. Well, you're getting a little emotional here. Just say Mashiach doesn't do miracles. It's halachas. So, shouldn't enter your mind? What is that? The point of it is, the Rambam just gave you 14 volumes of halachas. And all of that is meant to bring out the godliness in nature until the world becomes a dwelling place for Hashem. If you come along and say, yeah, we'll do mitzvahs for 5,000 years, and then Mashiach will come and miraculously fix everything. He said, whoa, that was not the deal. The deal is that Teva itself will become holy. So why do you need L'mayla Ma'ateva? If you think Mashiach needs to do miracles, then it's not Mashiach. Because a miracle is needed when nature doesn't do what it's supposed to do. When Mashiach comes, nature will do what it's supposed to do. So it shouldn't even enter your mind that everything I told you until now is really not going to work. Mashiach will come and perform some miracles. So don't do that. This is a very good example for it. A king has a hill in a very inconvenient place. He wants to get rid of it. So he makes an announcement that there's gold in the hill. And that whoever wants can come to the palace and borrow tools and dig in the hill, and whatever gold they find, they can keep. So, of course, everybody comes running. There's a gold rush, and they dig, and they chop, and they hack, and they chop. There's no gold. But they got rid of the hill. So the king, being a nice guy, comes from the palace with a wagon full of gold and gives everybody who worked on some gold. So everybody's happy. He got rid of the hill. People got their gold. Perfect, no? No, but it wasn't true. Chas v'shalom to say that that's God's plan. He tells us there's gold in Teva, so we work very hard with Mesiras Nefesh year after year after year to bring out the gold, and in the end, there's no gold in Teva. Nature has no gold. But you were a good boy and you worked hard, so Mashiach will come and reward you with miracles from the palace. Mm-hmm. So the Rambam says, don't do that.
So how does this work with the Rebbe and Malchus Paras, whatever sichos were from that year?
So there's no miracle involved. Mashiach will stand on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash and say, the time of your redemption has arrived.
So there are two different stories happening. There's the year the Mashiach comes, the Melech Paras picks a fight, everyone stresses out. It's the same medrash, right?
Yeah, but there's no miracle there. What's the miracle? Everybody's afraid, everybody's frightened, Jews are frightened, and Hashem says to the Jewish people, don't be afraid, I did it all for you.
And Purim Tavshin Aleph, when the missiles came and they didn't hit anybody?
So what was the miracle?
Nobody got hurt. 39 missiles, right? 39 Scud missiles, they fell and no one got hurt.
That's not what the Rebbe was excited about. Right?
I guess. Listen. Mm-hmm. So today you're saying...
I have a little suspicion. Mm-hmm. The reason nobody got hurt is because the Rebbe made sure that it wouldn't happen. Remember, he mixed into the elections, made sure that Perez doesn't become prime minister.
And I wasn't there, but sounds right.
You remember? Yes. The Rebbe made sure that the missiles coming from Iraq would not have chemical warheads. make a long story short, Saddam Hussein threatened to use chemical. In the end, there was no chemicals. The rockets that landed had no chemical warheads.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave a reason. If you add the weight of a chemical warhead, the rocket wouldn't reach Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't.
How does that connect to Paris?
So the question is, so why did they threaten? Why did they say there'd be chemical? And people were panicked and they ran into their gas rooms with gas masks. And the Rebbe said, you don't need gas masks. Why? There's not going to be a rocket with a chemical warhead. Because the Rebbe made sure that Peres doesn't become prime minister, so they won't give the West Bank to the Arabs, and they were planning to send the missiles from the West Bank.
Unbelievable. That's an interesting, yeah, that makes sense.
So when people say the Rebbe was a Novi, Chachem Odev Menovi, the Rebbe worked it out that it won't happen. And that's why the Rebbe was saying, it's the safest place. Zorg sich nicht.
This is a radical perspective, but also
No miracles involved.
Okay. So now let's bring it back to today. Today,
Also, the miracles of the 6-day war.
mm-hmm.
What was a miracle? The Rebbe convinced them to do a preemptive strike. So they went and they destroyed all the planes before they took off. What's the miracle? It's just a very good plan.
The Rebbe used it as a shefer gadol. The Rebbe puts a lot on the 6-day war.
Yeah. The excitement that caused was unusual. More than World War II.
The Rebbe speaks about the soldiers. When the Satmar said that it's not a nes, can't be a nes because nissim can't happen through people that don't keep mitzvahs. The Rebbe says, "What do you mean?"
So first of all, the very principle of it. Who says you can't have a nes? A lot of heroes in Torah itself who ended a war by doing something special. First, they weren't Jewish, they weren't holy, they weren't tzaddikim. That whole concept is offensive. But yes, there were miracles because it was so miraculously successful. But the real chiddush was they listened to the Rebbe and they did a preemptive strike. And in the Yom Kippur War, they didn't listen. The Rebbe said the same thing again. They listened to Kissinger.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not the same success.
So where would you put this current situation in?
So let's go back to the Medrash.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Mashiach going to say? If you don't believe me, look at my light that is shining on you. Oh, that's convincing. The miracles, I'm not impressed. But the light that's shining, what is that? What does that even mean? The whole world's focus is on Israel. Like nothing else is interesting, nothing else is important. There's a war in Russia, Ukraine. No time for that. Everyone is focused on Israel. That's the light that is shining on you, the spotlight. And what are people seeing? That this is a godly nation. People are seeing this is a godly nation. How else do you explain this? Everybody was certain that if the war in Gaza went on for more than a couple of months, Israel will become depleted, they'll become exhausted, they'll run out of rockets, they'll run out of money. Can't go on for more than a month. It went on for 2 years. And not only did it go on, a second front opened up with Hezbollah, and then a third front opens up with Syria, and a fourth front opens up with the Houthis in Yemen, and now a fifth. How is this even possible? I'm not talking about a miracle from Hashem. I'm talking about the miracle of the people. Who does this? Who is capable of this? And whatever we think of Netanyahu, whatever anyone thinks of Netanyahu, the man is Superman. How do you wake up in the morning? How do you carry that kind of responsibility with resistance from within, resistance from... Where is he getting this from? So when we become the miracle, that's Mashiach.
Mm-hmm.
When the world sees this is a godly people, and they're seeing it. I have another little detail. The hostages.
Mm-hmm.
They're not human. They come back after 500 days and they immediately become celebrities. They go on television, they go on in front of cameras, and they're speaking and they're inspiring and they're... Don't you need at least a couple of years of therapy first before you can even show your face? No. Some people don't even believe. Nah, come on, she wasn't a hostage. Can't be. And listen to what they're saying. Not they started to believe in God. Everybody in trouble starts to believe in God. It's not they wanted to do mitzvahs, not believe. They wanted to keep Shabbos, they wanted to fast on Yom Kippur. That never happened before. But the main point of it, what I'm trying to say is, it's not possible that the people who were holding them, the terrorists, the kidnappers, it's not possible that they were not deeply impressed by these hostages. I mean, if I was one of them, here I think I'm the godly one, right? Because I kill in the name of God. And I'm willing to die in the name of God. So I'm a godly person. And they watch these young kids be really godly. And they realize, whoa. They developed a respect for these hostages. They can't believe what they used to believe anymore. They have been enlightened. Anyway, so the world really... If you don't realize that the Jews are the chosen people, you're pushed deaf and dumb and blind. I mean, it can't be. So the Medrash says that Moshiach says, look in the name of God. Look at my light that is shining on you. You're in the spotlight, and everyone sees that you're a godly people. That's more Mashiach-dik than miracles.
It's interesting. So, like, people use the term Mashiach Satan. When you go there, then you don't use the term miracles anymore. Like Malay coming to Bibi with a picture of the Rebbe. That's Mashiach Satan. No one says it's a miracle because Trump coming to the oil. I don't know which. I hear this is a very interesting take.
Interesting word. The Baal Shem Tov meets Moshiach. And he says, when are you coming? Don't we already know the answer? The Bashur ben Levi met Mashiach. And he said, when are you coming? And he said, if you listen and do what I'm telling you, then I'll come.
Yeah.
So what's the question again? Must be the Baal Shem Tov was convinced that we are doing what Hashem wants. Obviously, to the best of our ability, under the circumstances with Golus and everything else. So he asks, okay, so now what? Because we're doing what you ask us to do. But so Mashiach says, when your teachings become popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most Jewish leaders, if they met Moshiach today, what would they ask? Most. They would ask, what are we doing wrong that we're still in Gullus? Are we not sneeze enough? Are we talking too much Lashon Hara? Are we not, whatever it is, right? The Baal Shem Tov said, no more blame on us. When are you coming?
There's a sikha, like I don't remember from the Rebbe, from the Friedrich Rebbe, that when he came and asked, it was already decided that Hayom Lishmo happened already. But I still don't see how that's the answer. What does it mean? So then what talking do we have to do?
So Mashiach says, when everyone talks like you and stops blaming the Eden. What is the mayonis of the Baal Shem Tov? Stop blaming Eden. But if you come to Mashiach and say, are we sinning somehow? Okay, fine. So what did you just do? Are you for the Jews or against? Like, what are you doing?
On some level, it's semantics. You're just asking what we should do to make it happen.
Which means we're doing something wrong, and that's why you're not coming.
The Rebbe keeps. Later it changed a little bit, but it started. Tshuva wasn't necessary. After Yisrael, Simcha, at different points, the Rebbe would say this is what we have to do. Not that he can't come till then, but there was always something that we can do more to make it happen.
No, the Rebbe kept saying there's no reason. We did Tshuva, and we're our Fatzas Mayones, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, the onus is on Mashiach. Where are you? Mashiach comes naturally, not through miracles. That's the main point that we're making, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what the Rambam is so emphatic about. So if you want to open your eyes and see, like the Rebbe said, don't look for miracles, because you're looking in the wrong direction. Look what's going on with Yidden and how the world is seeing us. If there's a change in that, that's Mashiach.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you're saying, because there's a letter. It's not necessarily stereo to what you're saying, but it's an interesting point. Someone wrote to the Rebbe, it has to be in the 50s, I don't remember exactly what year it was. And he was an Israeli guy, and he was, I would imagine, religious Zionist. And he writes to the Rebbe that we should kach and sheva mitzvahs peinach, because if Mashiach's coming, and he viewed Israel as the beginning of Mashiach, so then that's what needs to happen, right? The next step is bring it to the world. The Rebbe answers him that just like Yitzis Mitzrayim, Mashiach has to come in Ofen Nisi. Now, again, I don't think it's necessarily disagreeing, but the point is there is going to be a moment where it's going to be, the change is going to happen. I'm saying Chitz HaMesim is an S. I'm saying it's on a very basic level. But it's interesting that on the one hand, that's true. On the other hand, the Rebbe eventually does talk about Shevis V'nech. So I guess there's two sides to it.
Yeah. But in the last years, the Rebbe was saying, we got to stop believing in Mashiach and bring Mashiach. And you don't bring Mashiach by making a ness. Because we can't do that. Now, it's going to be miraculous in the sense of stunning, but not supernatural. Neflois doesn't necessarily mean a miracle. It means something wonderful. You know? When Netanyahu stands there and says, we had siyata d'shmaya without a yamoka, that's Mashiach.
That's true.
And he's not running for office. You know, it's not like he's trying to get elected.
I think he's really scared this time. Yitaka needs Hashem for this one.
He has reason to be scared. Kind of responsibility. He's practically making the decision on his own. It's pretty impressive.
So if you were going to compare Tafshin Nun Nun Aleph to today, in the sense of where the world's holding, so the signs, I'm not going to say Nissim, but the signs that are pointing, so you're seeing it today as well, if not more.
The Rebbe said many times that we are the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geula. That wasn't all good news. That was like kind of a warning. It's not going to be simple. Because to be with 1 foot in Golus and 1 foot, either in or out, but 1 foot here, 1 foot there, very confusing, very complicated. It can make you crazy. The Rebbe is saying, Otat kommt Moshiach, umelikt in a tiefe Golus pnimi, cheshech kofel. So, in the last couple of years, maybe since COVID, or a little before, 2 things have to happen. Number 1, the falsehood, the sheker, the lies have to stop. And number 2, the truth has to become obvious. Since COVID, all the lies have come out. There are no secrets anymore. We know who is evil. We know what their plans were. We know. It took 3 years. And it got worse and worse. Well, it didn't get worse. The lies became more obvious, which means that they're going to die. Because once they're exposed, once a lie is exposed, it's finished. Now, with the hostages being released and Netanyahu going into Iran, now all of a sudden the truth is starting to become obvious. That's the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geula. The last generation of Golus means all the lies have to come out. All the evil has to be exposed. Isbaru v'yislabnu.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened in the last 3 years. Now, the truth is becoming so obvious. Like today, if somebody says, what claim do Jews have to Israel? That's your question? Go home and hide yourself in shame, or go back to school and learn something because you don't know anything. I'm not going to have a conversation with you. You don't know that the Jews are the chosen people? Where were you born? Like, you don't know that Yerushalayim is the capital of Israel? You don't know that? I can't talk to you. It's embarrassing.
This is not only happening on one side of the aisle?
No.
Mm.
Now we can speak straight. In fact, what did the Rebbe tell Netanyahu? You're going into a place of lies, bring out the truth. These are the 2 sides of Geula. The Ra has to die, and the Tov has to become obvious.
Mm. They were told us about the candle. Only needs 1 light. Okay, I think this was an interesting take on the current events. But I want to go back with you a little earlier. So, I imagine a lot of people know this, but in case they don't, you translated the Rebbe Sichos simultaneously, the Farbrengens, the televised ones. So, I'd just love to hear a little bit how that was. If there was any Mashiach Sichos, how they were. What was to explain this in English, what the reception was, etc.
It was an amazing 8 years, 9 years. It was only the weekday Farbrengens, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only the Hasidic holidays, not Purim.
Mm-hmm.
Purim was not on camera. So it was 6 times a year. So at first, when the Rebbe agreed to have the cameras come in, it was cutting edge technology. No one had ever done this. We had to rent time on a satellite and beam the Farbrengen to the satellite. And the satellite sent it back down to stations, whatever. So it was not television, not network television. It wasn't cable television. It was uplink. It was a new thing. Mm. The Rebbe agreed to have it happen, which was amazing. But how are people going to understand? Because the Rebbe was going to farbreng like a farbreng. There was not going to be anything different. Let the cameras come and see what a farbrengen is. So nothing changed. They didn't clean up 770. Exactly the way it was, right? But people have to understand. So it has to be translation. So the first Farbrengen, there were 3, maybe 4 people, and we were going to each do a sikha. A long story short, by the next Farbrengen, nobody showed up. It was so exhausting, simultaneous. Nobody does this. Nobody. More than a 5-minute conversation between 2 leaders, and they always get jumbled and you misunderstand. But nobody does simultaneous translation without preparation. In the UN, where they have simultaneous translation, the translator gets a copy of the speech on paper. And the speaker is going to read exactly those same words again. So the translator has the script in front of him. Yeah. And then the translator has a button. He pushes the button and a little light goes on by the speaker's podium to tell him to slow down. Well, that's not going to... The only thing that Rebbe told us in advance is which Masechta he's going to make a hadron on. Everything else was... So trying to hear and translate, it was impossible. First of all, it was choppy. Listen, translate, listen, translate. Listen. It wasn't pleasant to listen to. And by the end of the Sikha, wiped out, exhausted. So by the second Farbrengen, I was the only one there. Now I'm thinking, I could have written to the Rebbe, how do you translate this? How do you translate that? What should I say? I could have gotten a lot of answers. Would have been. It never occurred to me. Mm-hmm. You need to do this. You do it. What are you asking? Anyway, I found out much later, after the Farbrengen stopped, that after the second Farbrengen, the Rebbe asked to listen to a sikha.
To the translation?
Yeah. So Krinsky, Hillel David, brought in a player, and he played, and the Rebbe listened to the whole sikha. Afterwards, the Rebbe said, next time, make it a shorter sikha. Because the Rebbe wouldn't interrupt in the middle of a sikha, which is something. Anyway, the Rebbe listened to the whole thing. Someplace in the middle of the sikha, the Rebbe smiled. The sikha ended, and he said, thank you, and that was it. So I asked Rabbi Krinsky, who approved my translating? I said, the Rebbe took your word for it, that it was a good translation? He says, no, never. Your son? The Rebbe was relying on him? No, never. I said, so... And if the Rebbe he says, the Rebbe lets everybody do what they're capable of. I said, yeah, this is a little personal, no? And if the Rebbe is just going to let me do it, why did he want to listen to why after the second Farbrengen? Why not after the first Farbrengen? Rabbi Krinsky said, do you know the Lubavitcher Rebbe? He wasn't looking to see if you're doing a good job. He wanted to see what he can do to make it easier on you. I was like, yeah, that's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So then I remembered that by the third Farbrengen, the Rebbe used more English words. Like, for example, so I translated with more power, more strength. So the Rebbe said by the Farbrengen, mit mehr koyach und mehr enthusiasm. The effect that the Farbrengen had on people, it was like Yechidus. The Rebbe came through, the Rebbe, you know what I mean? It came through over the screen. People go to acting school for many years, and part of the training is don't look at the camera. Camera's not there. The first Farbrengen, the Rebbe looked at the camera twice. By the second Farbrengen, but you would think, by a Farbrengen, you're there, you feel the Rebbe's energy over the television, over the satellite. The MS came through so powerfully. I was being interviewed by a Jewish guy in Canada at a radio show. And he says, I was sitting and watching television, playing with my remote, and all of a sudden, the Rebbe was there. He says, I just sat there and cried. I said, it was a Lebedike Farbrengen. Why were you crying? It was a happy occasion. He says, no. He's a kid of a survivor. He says, I was so overwhelmed with pleasure to see a Jew who is so comfortable in his own skin. So why are no rabbis on television? The big speakers, the orators, the guys make great speeches and great sermons. Nobody's on television. Why? In the synagogue, in the temple, great speech. If a bunch of non-Jews walk in, all of a sudden they're uptight and nervous. To speak to the non-Jewish world now. The Rebbe sat there speaking to the world and was completely comfortable exactly the way he... It made the guy cry. I mean, who is so comfortable? Where do you see a Jew who is so... So they had a number flashing on the screen if you want to call in. And they had a bunch of Bachrim sitting by a bank of telephones answering the calls. Mm-hmm. It was a phenomenon. This guy called He's on a United States destroyer on a ship, and they're moored right off of Iceland or Greenland. He's been on the ship for a year. He's one of, 4,000 people on the ship. And they were sitting around in the lounge, and they're playing with their remote, and the Rebbe came on. And he was like uncomfortable because he was the only Jew there. And so he said, I gotta keep changing channels. They said, no, we want to see this. And by the end, he sat there so proud. He had to call in and say, there was a phone call from a monk in Tibet or something. Called in to say, what is this? I never knew Judaism had such a deep philosophy.
Oh.
It was amazing, amazing.
Mm. Besides for that second Farbrengen, are there any other sichas or specific things Rebbe spoke about that?
I realized the main challenge, because from all the books about translating, nothing was helpful. But the Gemara says that the Meturgaman should not speak louder than the Rav. The translator shouldn't speak louder than the teacher. One of the whole purposes of a Meturgaman is because people couldn't hear and he had a bigger voice, or he was like whatever, so that people could hear. So what do you mean don't speak louder? It means don't become a personality. You don't exist. You're just a voice. So, for example, when the Rebbe got really upset about something, I have to keep speaking the same way. I'm not upset. And I don't exist as a person. You're going to hear that the Rebbe is upset from the Rebbe. But the translator just translates.
So you kept one tone the whole time, or you went with the Rebbe's tone?
The tone of question and answer, but not angry or happy or no.
So that they can pick up from the Rebbe's voice.
Yeah. Like, for example, if the Rebbe made a joke and the translator laughs.
Mm-hmm.
Not allowed. You can't exist. On the other hand, I'm sure that the Rebbe wanted to know, can I speak freely, or do I have to worry about what you're going to say? How you're going to, right? So just for example, how do you translate in Yiddish, the Yiddish of say, Afilu agoy kann es verstehen? Even a non-Jew can appreciate this. That could be politically...
Well, you already fixed it a little bit.
Huh?
You already fixed it a little bit when you said appreciate.
Yeah. But to make it really, you don't have to be Jewish to appreciate this. Nobody can have any hurt feelings, right? Things of that sort, that you had to be keenly aware of what you're doing, and at the same time, you can't think. So they asked me, for example, after the Sikha, during the singing, to give a summary of the Sikha. I didn't remember the Sikha. I had no idea what the Sikha was about.
Because you're doing line by line.
You know the expression, in one ear and out the other? No, this had to be in one ear and out the mouth.
Yeah.
Skip the brain. Because if you stop, you fall behind. So that was the main responsibility, I think, was that the Rebbe doesn't have to be uncomfortable with the camera or cautious. He can speak freely the way he speaks.
Mm-hmm.
That was the scary part. You make a mistake, you're okay, fine. So, egg on your face. But if you make a bad move, and we still don't know why it stopped. It stopped when the Rebbe passed away. Memches.
And this was never done for sichos afterwards. This whole television and everything. Did you feel a difference in the Farbrengens between the Shabbos ones, the Yom Tov ones, Purim?
No, the only difference was that the first two sichos were about prayer in public schools, juvenile delinquency.
Every time?
Sheva mitzvahs, yeah.
Every time the first two sichos were different. Okay. It's very interesting.
Because that was prime time. Right? The Farbrengens started at 9. That's prime time. After 11, who's... So that's when you say Amaimer, you say Hadran.
Did I ever speak about these themes before? This started then?
No, I spoke about it before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he started back in the 60s. Prayer in public school.
Mm-hmm.
Not every Farbrengen, but letters and campaigning. And
fascinating. All right. Now, if it's okay with you, we're going to move on to another part of our discussion. This one touches upon the Aleph, which is the paper we put out. The paper that we're putting out for, not this week, but the week afterwards, the week, Gimel Tammuz, Motzei Shabbos, is about Mashiach B'zman HaGolus. So in general, every week's a different topic. We bring some sources. This one, the discussion that we have here really is we're trying to give over the idea that Moshiach is not a entity, a person who's far from you, doesn't exist in your world, B'chlal. But rather, you read a story here, a story there, and you can start feeling that you actually could have a personal relationship or care about Mashiach because he cares about you. The basic example or story would be the Mashiach's Mashiach's, in pain because Yidden are in pain. So on this topic, there's a lot to discuss in general about how to make Mashiach, the Rebbe, Chassidus, Ava, Yira, things that are not just concepts but more personal. So I hope everyone's okay. I just want to read the Orach Chaim that we have in this week's paper. I'm just going to read one line from it, and I guess we can discuss it afterwards. So Orach Chaim is speaking about a different thing, but then he goes off into talking about how this can be derech remez yirmoz lahoyer ha'ara gdoila al echad ha'miyuchad shebe'uma. I have to translate. And in a way of a remez, in a way of a alluding, this might be going on the one specific special one for the nation, which is Mashiach. So he says like this. Why is he referred to as an Evyon? Ki hu Evyon banu shemis'ave masa yavel aleinu. He's an Evyon. Evyon is not a regular poor person, but he's a poor person who wants for something, right? So he's having a taiva to come and take us out of Galus. And then the Orach Chaim brings the story of Yeshua ben Levi, the famous story that we referenced earlier, but he adds something. He says, he says we can learn from the story that the Chazal say by Yeshua ben Levi. When the Mashiach met him, he asked him how the Yidden in the world, how they're holding up, what they're doing. Yeshua ben Levi told him that the Yidden are waiting and they're sitting and waiting for him. When the Mashiach heard, so the Chacham used the term chassid, the famous Sadin, he started crying from his great desire to come redeem the Jewish people. So this was one example, and probably the best example that we found, and it's in next week's paper, about how we should look at Mashiach as something that's a personal relationship we can have with him. So again, on this topic, especially as this week's Gimel Tammuz, this is something that I'd love to hear some insight from you on.
Well, it shouldn't be surprising that Mashiach wants to come more than we want him to come. I mean, he is ahead of us. He's higher than us. And what's true and what's holy and is more important to him than it is to us. We're just kvetching because we have problems. So no, there's no question. Also, the Shechina itself. Shechinta Begalusa. The Eibishter wants Mashiach. And that's why when the Rebbe said, we want Mashiach, and some people said, well, that's a little chutzpahdik. We want Mashiach. Who's the we? Who's the we? We sitting at the Farbrengen? The Rebbe is saying, we all want Mashiach. He's talking to the Eibishter. You want Mashiach. We want Mashiach. No. Not you don't want and we do want and we're going to... Well, we want Mashiach means as much as the Eibishter wants Mashiach, we also want Mashiach. And therefore, it's time to come. Who's holding it up? So it's not that the Eibishter doesn't want, and we have to convince him. It's chas v'shalom. It's the exact opposite. The Eibishter is waiting for us to want at least a little bit like he wants. So, of course, the same thing is with Mashiach himself. He certainly wants. Or as somebody said recently, what's the difference between our generation and all previous generations? In all previous generations, we waited for Mashiach. In our generation, Mashiach is waiting for us. That's what the Rebbe was changing in our thinking and in our... Don't believe in Mashiach. You believed in Mashiach 5,700 years. Enough already? Like, the first thing that's going to change when Mashiach comes? We will stop saying, I believe in Mashiach. Right? There will only be 12 Ikrim instead of 13. So the Rebbe is saying, okay, so let's stop already. Stop saying Ani Mamin. Ani Mamin B'Bias HaMashiach means he's not here. Because he was here, you wouldn't. So what the Rebbe was saying is not, let's strengthen our faith in Mashiach. Our faith in Mashiach is pretty strong. But faith in Mashiach is not good news. The Rebbe is saying, stop believing and start doing something. What are you doing to bring Mashiach? You're believing? Shkoyach. You're a hero. What? So many times people went over to the Rebbe and said, we all believe. What's the problem? You're not listening. What year did the Rebbe stop singing Ani Mamin by Farbrengens? I don't know either. But I remember every Farbrengen ended with Ani Mamin. There was a sikha for women, a sikha for the Russian Jews, Ani Mamin, bringing is over. And all of a sudden, Ani Mamin, gone. And the second part of the Ani Mamin song, Afal Pisha Yisma Meya, the Rebbe never said that. So the Rebbe basically went from Emunah in Bias HaMashiach to Lahavi L'Meis HaMashiach. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time for people to catch on. The Rebbe is not asking you to have more Emunah. I don't even know what that means. Have more emunah, more emunah. What does that even mean? How do you have more emunah? But like everything else, by the Rebbe, hamaisa hu ha'ikir. In the earlier times, making the world holy meant making yourself holy. Because who else can you influence? So what do you mean, make yourself holy? Increase your love for a fellow Jew. It's an avodah. Don't take the physical so seriously. Bittul oilamis. How did people work on that? In davening, 6 hours under the talus, you sat there and you worked on yourself to have more avos Yisrael. And to not be so hung up on physical. Or whatever other virtue we're supposed to work on. The Rebbe came and said, I don't know what's going on under that talus. You finish davening 6 hours later, you have more avos Yisrael or not? How you gonna know? So the Rebbe said, no, from now on, hamaisa hu ha'ikir. Don't pray about avos Yisrael. Take a one-way ticket to a community, devote yourself to the Jews of that community, and let's see your avos Yisrael. Now it's measurable. So it's the same job, the same virtue, the same godliness, but do it. Same is true with Mashiach. We believe in Mashiach, we wait for Mashiach, we long for Mashiach. It makes Mashiach cry that we're waiting for him. The Rebbe says, stop waiting and don't make anybody cry. What are you doing? What are you doing to bring Mashiach? It's measurable, and we can know immediately, are you or are you not?
Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you, I hear what you're saying in the fact that, I think it's a very heartwarming medrash, but it's a good point. Or Chaim, it doesn't necessarily come out in an actionable way, which is what we're looking for. But I want to come from the other side for a second. Talk on a level of iskashros, right? So my generation, I'm 27. We're all post-Kimmel Tammuz, and moving on shlichus. This is the life that we're living now, and in a way, our actions are doing. I shouldn't say their actions are doing great, but at least there we those are measurable, right? Either you're doing what you're supposed to do, and everyone's trying to do, but each kol chad lefum shir delay. That's beautiful, but once in a while, we want to go a little bit deeper. And we want to be able to not only do the right thing, but also feel the right thing. And if there's any time during the year to think about such a thing, this would be a good time. And one of the issues, and again, this is one of the reasons why it spoke to me, again, it's not necessarily the same exact thing, but it connects, is the Eibishter is something which is true and in our lives and everything, but in a way, one of the points of the Rebbe, so to speak, if I can speak so grub, was to create a person that you can connect to on a personal way, on a personal level, a relationship. In a post-Kimmel Tammuz world, that's more tricky. So when you speak to mechanchim today, you speak to people today, there are people that have an opinion, and I can't say necessarily they're right or wrong, whatever it is, but that to a certain extent, that's the Rebbe today. And to try getting young people, forget about ourselves. I'm this young person as well, but next generation, my children, to try getting them to have a relationship with the Rebbe, which is personal, is something which, whatever, you have to wait for Mashiach to come. And this is something which is very hard to accept. So the idea that you can have an entity, a person that you don't see, but that you could build and create and connect to in a physical way, to give an imagery of a person that cries, that cares, that's listening, that's something that I'd love to, I think a lot of people would be very interested in hearing how to formulate that a little better and make that a reality in their lives.
it's a little bit dangerous to try to continue what was for the older generation with the younger generation. Because you hear from a lot of people, a lot of young people, like, will you stop already? You were there, you went on Yechidus, you were there by Farbrengens. We're not relating to this. Don't keep telling me what it was like. You just make me feel bad. So in some way, it's actually discouraging. What needs to happen and what is happening is that the younger generation of Chassidim have a connection to the Rebbe that we did not have. Stop trying to give them what you had. They have something we never had. And I don't know how to explain that because we never had it. But every child grows up and the Rebbe is real. I don't know how. And it doesn't come from telling your Yechidus and your excitement and your... It's directly between the Rebbe and the kids. The Rebbe is doing it. We can't do it. We can only make it worse. So just stand there and marvel at what's going on and don't ruin it.
I have a baby, 7 months old. What am I supposed to tell him? So I should wait, let the magic happen?
You want to talk about iskashrus? Like every other virtue, by the Rebbe, hamaise hu ha'ikar. You want to work on being closer to the Rebbe, being connected to the Rebbe? How are you going to do that? In your own mind? I don't know what's going on in your own mind. It's not convincing. Even hiskashrus is hamaise hu ha'ikar. If you do what the Rebbe needs you to do, you're connected. And it's measurable, and it's not negotiable. You're like, either yes or no. You're doing it or you're not doing it. People who go out on shlichus who never saw the Rebbe, there is no one in the past that had more hiskashrus than that. No one. Say, yeah, but they never really saw. They never really. They are more makusha than the previous generation. In fact, the previous generation cannot even imagine being makusha without seeing the Rebbe.
But how do you make that into a feeling? So you're right. Okay, so again, as actionably could be you could equate or not equate, whatever you want to put it. But how do you make that into a feeling? Or there's no hope for a feeling. Not no hope for life, but no hope.
There is a feeling. There's a commitment. There's an attachment. There's a devotion. What's missing here? What humbled Moshe Rabbeinu? How did he become the most humble person in all of history? Because he saw our generation and he said, how did they do that? You were never on Har Sinai? How could you be from? You never saw a Mishkan? How could you possibly be from? It humbled him. The big Chassidim, who were very makusha and willing to give their lives to the Rebbe, they look at this generation and say, how do you do that? You never heard of Farbrengen. You were never there. You never went to Yechidus. The Rebbe never told you off. How does that happen? Going back to the hostages, we have great heroes in the history of Hasidim who went through gulags and labor camps and torture and interrogations and never budged. But they were brought up on Hasidus and they had a Rebbe. These hostages, they never budged. They became more and more observant and more. They make all our heroes look like nothing. Because where is this coming from? So, of course, you have to teach your children the siches and the Rebbe's opinions on things, and the Rebbe's approach, and the Rebbe's kindness, and the Rebbe. Of course. That's all factual, not your hiskashrus. Don't give the children your hiskashrus. They'll have a better one. But of course, you have to inform them. You can't hide the picture of the Rebbe so that they'll have pure hiskashrus.
So there's no way to work on gefill?
This is full of gefiel. But the gefiel comes from the doing, not from the imagining.
So you're not saying to avoid gefill, you're saying to do the actions, and the feeling will come with it.
Yes. I mean, really, who has more Avas Yisrael? The average shliach? The average guy who goes on Miftzayim? Or the big mashpiyim in Lubavitch in Russia? What exactly is Mashiach? Like, who is into Mashiach and who is not into Mashiach? In the essential point of it all, if you're absolutely convinced the world must get better than it is today, that's Mashiach. If you're one of these pessimists who say, nah, it'll never change. There'll always be war, there'll always be crime, there'll always be evil, just get used to it. That's a person without Mashiach. So Mashiach simply means God's plan will succeed. That's Mashiach. There are some very religious Jews who believe in Mashiach, but they don't think anything will ever change. We will always believe in Mashiach, and we will always be in Golus. In other words, we're not going anywhere. We're just playing out the role. That's without Mashiach. But anybody, whether they use the word Mashiach or not, anybody who says, come on, it can't be like this. Can't be like this. It's got to be better. Yeah. That's Mashiach. We're not running on a treadmill. We're actually getting somewhere. And that is important. Are we getting there? Are we closer now than we were yesterday or not? Yes, we are. Every day, practically, something more happens. We're literally getting closer every day. So, to be precise in our language, we don't believe that Mashiach is going to come. We believe that Mashiach is coming. It's an ongoing process. It's not someday out of nowhere Mashiach will show up and everything's going to become good. That's childish. Not he's going to come. He is coming because we've been working on it for 3,000 years. Mm-hmm. So Mashiach will come b'hesach hadas. When he comes, there'll be a surprise. We talk about it, we work at it, we live our lives for it, and it's going to be a surprise? Not his coming is going to be a surprise. What happens when he comes? You're going to be surprised. As much as you think you know, the Rebbe says, what does it mean that we went into exile because we didn't serve God with joy? We served him, but not with joy. And because of that, we were thrown out of Israel and sent into exile. The Rebbe says, come on. That is not a punishment that fits the crime. For not being happy, you make us miserable. Like the father says, I'll give you something to cry about. No. The Rebbe says, the reason for the exile is because we have to spread the word to the world. The world is not coming to us, so we have to go to them. So what does it mean that it's because we weren't serving God with joy? So the Rebbe says, if we had served with joy, if we did mitzvahs with joy, it would have erased all the negative effects of our sins. And we wouldn't have had to go into exile. The enjoyment, the joy with which we do a mitzvah is as powerful as tshuva, without the bitterness of the regret. How much joy? What kind of joy? So the Rebbe says amazingly, Mesimcha v'tuv levov merev koil. More than any other joy. If you do a mitzvah with a joy that is greater than any other joy, then it erases your sins. Which other joy? A good meal? Gan Eden. If the joy with which you do a mitzvah is greater than the joy that souls feel in heaven, that will erase your sins. How could your joy be greater than the joy that souls feel in heaven? This is quintessential Rebbe. In heaven, you get to enjoy godliness. When you do a mitzvah, you are doing what God Himself wants. The thought that you can do for Him is much greater joy than what He'll give you when you get to heaven. So if you can do a mitzvah with joy because you know who you're serving, that erases all the ugliness, all the everything. The fact that you can go on a shlichus for the Rebbe with joy, that's greater than Gan Eden. That makes heaven child's play. And that's why dying is not a good idea. You got to stop it. Going to heaven, terrible. All the souls who have been in heaven for thousands of years can't wait to come back into a body so that they can do what God really enjoys. To do for Him, meaning to serve Him, rather than take gifts and blessings from Him, which are not bad. I think of all the things we've spoken about, this is the main punchline. Stop using God for your benefit and start doing things for His benefit. Otherwise, you're missing the boat.
And in his kashrus?
Same thing. We want from the Rebbe brachas and all sorts of things, and we write notes and we ask. Whenever we're in trouble, we're sure run to the oil. If you're enjoying doing what He wants, you'll have much more blessings than.
Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Friedman, for joining us today. It was a very enjoyable talk and a lot to think about. We'll have to continue thinking about it in the future. I hope our listeners and our viewers will appreciate it and will learn from it as well. And Bez Hashem, we should do this again in Mashiach's times.
Next time we should sit and talk about, do you remember when Mashiach came? How would you feel? What was going on? Where were you?
Exactly.